So we're talking about God being the actor. God's the one who's doing these things that are done. And all Moses is really is a herald. He is a messenger. He is the one speaking for God. And when a herald went out, they'd blow the trumpet and then they'd roll open the scroll and read, hear ye, thus says the king. Okay. The message wasn't from the herald. The authority wasn't from the herald. The herald's only authority was to proclaim the word of the king. So when we preach, when we teach, when we share, all we are doing is speaking on behalf of the one whose word it is that we share. So just something to keep in mind as we see this play out today in chapter 4 of the book of Exodus, and Moses' reticence and God's response, his answer to Moses' hesitancy and his fear. And this is, my little scrolly wheel is going to be jumping all over today. Time to just use the arrow keys again. This is, again, right in the middle of God talking to Moses at the burning bush. Then Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.' The Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' He said, 'A staff.' And he said, 'Throw it on the ground.' And he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, 'Put out your hand and catch it by the tail.' So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Again, the Lord said to him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." And he put his hand inside his cloak. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous, like snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back inside your cloak." So he put his hand back inside his cloak. And when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. "If they will not believe you," God said, "or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. And if they will not believe these two signs or listen to your voice, you shall take some of the water of the Nile and pour it out on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground." Okay, we will stop there and back to the top and work our way through. So this is first and foremost Moses being afraid to go to the children of Israel, to the elders. And just a side note on that, it always talks about, from this point going forward, it always talks about there being elders, that there were the council of wise men, of older dudes, and elders tend to be, older. Why? Because there's all kinds of wisdom that comes with age, just through experience and seeing what God has done and how God operates. Their wisdom comes with age. And at whatever age you are at now, you can know. You look back, and you'll look back and think, 5-10 years ago, whatever, you'll think, how foolish I was. What was I thinking when I would do things like that? Whatever. You think that now, another 10 years, you have more wisdom, because wisdom just comes with experience. So here, God is talking about first Moses going to the children of Israel and showing them, announcing this message of deliverance, this promise of deliverance to them. And Moses is reticent about that, and he's terrified of going before Pharaoh. So God gives him signs. He gives him signs. The Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A staff." A staff, and throughout history and in all kinds of cultures, a staff has been a symbol of power, of authority, of ruling authority. It definitely was in Egypt. Now, Moses' staff wasn't anything special. It was a big piece of wood that he probably found and used to walk around with, to aid him in walking, going up hills, up onto the mountain of God, whatever. But you have this other thing, that this simple little staff that Moses had, just a piece of wood, is in contrast to the fancy ornate staff that symbolized being Pharaoh in Egypt. And the little staff that seems insignificant, it's not impressive, is going to outdo the one who holds the staff of power, so to speak. So the simple staff does something else. He said, throw it on the ground. He threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. Freaked him out. I mean, he's there. He's with God. God tells him to throw the staff on the ground. It turns into a serpent. It kind of freaks him out, and he runs from it. If I threw a stick on the ground and it turned into a serpent, I would probably run away as well. But the snake was symbolic of, it was the emblem of the god Uraeus. And let me show you this. See that thing on Pharaoh's head? That's Tutankhamun's grave. Familiar picture. What is that thing? It's a serpent. It's an emblem of divine protection from this god Uraeus. And it was especially prevalent in southern Egypt. But we have these different things that go on, and we'll talk about this in greater depth when it gets to the point where Moses is throwing down his staff in front of Pharaoh. We have these different things that are very obvious to anyone back then. We have to kind of put on I'm going to put on my 1500 BC hat and start to think like these people, or try to think like these people. Different time, different world, different culture, all kinds of things were different, okay? Here with this, back to Moses, Egypt. Everyone in that day understood these symbols, and symbols were much more important to them than they are to us. And they knew that when this happens, when Moses throws down his staff, and then the Pharaoh has the Egyptian sorcerers imitate that, and they do, and then Moses' snake eats their snake. This whole thing, every single thing that happens, is about cosmological warfare. God is crushing the gods of Egypt. In so doing, he is, in a way, announcing in advance that he is going to reclaim the nations. They all answer to him. These gods who are in charge of the other nations, they've misled everyone, and they think that their gods are all powerful and all of that. God's throwing down here and saying, no, they're not. And I'm going to pick the biggest and most impressive gods of all that exist now, and I'm going to squash them like bugs, and then I'm going to leave them dead in the sea after I lead my children out with a mighty and outstretched arm, which is the way he talked about it. Now think of an outstretched arm. Nobody messes with me. Nobody messes with me is what he's saying, right? Our Father, when you were little kids, you all thought of me as invincible, my kids, right? You thought of me as invincible. Nothing scared Dad, right? Because that's the way it seems to you. That's the way I thought of my father, right? Now, truth is, a lot of things scare your dad, no matter who your dad is. But he didn't let you know it, because it was his job to protect you, make you feel safe, all of that. With the Heavenly Father, it really is that nothing scares him, that he's in charge, he's in control. And if he's going to march into Egypt, kick butt, take names, and get his kids the heck out of there, there is nothing that anyone can do about that. That is what this is all about. He's saving his children. He is forming a nation. He's going to give them the land that was promised. But he's also crushing the opposition, the false gods who have set up against him. And if we go read, I read this week, interestingly, and I wasn't thinking about this stuff when I read it, but it was another one of those things when you have something that has opened up a new perspective on the scriptures to you, you read things again, and it's like, oh, wow, there was more to that than I thought. Psalm 2, very well known messianic psalm prophesying about the coming of Christ. But listen to what it says. Why do the nations rage? They heard that and they thought of the 70 nations. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, that's Pharaoh, and the rulers take counsel together. Divine counsel concept. The rulers, those other false gods, take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. That's Jesus. I will tell of the decree of the Lord. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. That's talking to Jesus. You are my son. I have begotten you. So this, again, this came to mind because I had looked at it this week and was reading it this past week. Cosmological warfare. And Pharaoh, don't forget, Pharaoh believed himself to be, and no doubt was, he believed himself to be the physical incarnation of Horus, the ultimate god in the pantheon of Egypt. But he was possessed by Horus. With all of these kingdoms, and they had these rituals that they went through when they became king, he was possessed by Horus. So in taking on Pharaoh, God is taking on Horus, and he's going to kick his butt. So he's going to throw down the staff. This is first talking about going to the children of Israel, the elders, and showing them, I've come to save you, because Moses didn't think they would believe that he had been sent. It's a legitimate concern. Throw it on the ground. He threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put it out and caught it. It became a staff in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. There is this other thing that in the beginning of something, when it is in its infancy, and the nation of Israel is going to be in its infancy, God acts in outside of the normal rules. Supernatural. That's what it means, nature. We're bound to nature. Gravity, it works for me all too well. Physics, time, space, all of that, I'm bound to that. God isn't. He can operate above, beyond, outside of it. Okay? And that is what he's going to be doing in this formative time. God operates the same way. He did that here in the forming of the nation of Israel with these mighty works that he does, that he refers to again throughout the prophets and everything else looking back. But the miraculous events over time, if you graph them in frequency, they decrease. It goes down and down and down and down and down and down and down. Okay? So also with the church. At the beginning, Jesus was doing all kinds of miracles, and then the disciples were doing miracles. But as the timeline progresses through the New Testament era, those miracles decrease and decrease and decrease because they're not needed anymore. He gives his word. But just an interesting parallel there as well. He gives the miracles to when something big and new is going on because they need assurance. He understands us. Now the thing with the putting the hand in the cloak, leprosy. It calls it leprosy here. The word can mean a lot of different things, and scholars like to talk a lot about, well, it's not necessarily the leprosy that we think of as leprosy. It doesn't matter. They were scared to death of any kind of leprosy. It was bad news. It got you ostracized. So I don't know. There probably is, but it's escaping me. A parallel in today's world, but maybe not. It was you came down with some form of leprosy, boom, you were out of here. You were kicked out. You were kept away. They weren't going to risk it. It really was a risk, unlike certain other diseases that get blown up and used for political reasons. But we won't go there, even though I think I just did. So he heals the leprosy. It's there, it's gone. And then that's going to come up again when Aaron and Miriam rebel against Moses a little bit. They get turned leprous. It scared the bejesus out of people. Just terrified them. Leprosy. And in case you don't know, true full-blown leprosy today called Hansen's disease, it still exists in poor places in Africa and in other very poor places around the world. It's a disease that basically eats up through your skin, into your joints, eats them all off, your fingers fall off, your hands fall off. It's terrible, terrible, awful thing. Anyway. So another powerful sign. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even those two signs or listen to your voice, you shall take some of the water of the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the ground. I mean, that's going to impress anyone. It's a God thing, right? That's the only place this can come from. And we'll save talking about the Nile and blood in more detail for later. And here's the verse we've jumped ahead to a few times. But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." Let's just talk about that. It basically saying he has a heavy tongue. That was the phrase that's used here in Hebrew. Heavy tongue, heavy lips. He doesn't speak well. What does that mean? I believe that it's very hard to know what that means. Does it mean he stuttered? Does it mean that he had some kind of speech impediment? Maybe he just didn't speak clearly. It could be all kinds of things, but also it could be, and this is Paul said he didn't speak well. I have a hard time believing that, but by our standards, there are very few people today who are what we would refer to as orators. They can turn a phrase. They can speak, they can speech. They can speech and command an audience. They can speak and command an audience. People just listen to them. Back in the day, in cultures of years gone by, and not really even all that long since, I mean, Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. We listen to that and it's like, wow, what eloquence. By the standards of the day, there was another guy who spoke that day. He spoke for 3 hours. And he was a professional orator. And then Lincoln got up and did the Gettysburg Address that took, 45 seconds or a minute and 45 seconds, whatever it was. By the standards of the day, the other guy was a much greater speaker. The Gettysburg Address became famous because it's just so poignant and very brief, concise, and to the point. People used to be able to turn a phrase, and the people who were really good at it were orators. God was sending Moses to be something he wasn't. Moses wasn't an orator. You didn't go do these kind of things if you didn't have that gift, that ability to speak and get people to listen. Okay? That's why I believe why Moses is saying this. It's not that he has a speech impediment or anything else. Maybe he does a little bit. It doesn't matter. Only professionals really spoke in these kind of settings that Moses was being sent into. But what is God's response? Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now, therefore, go, and I will be your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." God saying, go. I got this. I don't care about the rules of the culture of who speaks, who doesn't, how eloquent you must be, etc. I don't care. I'm going to make it work. I just turned a stick into a snake. I made your hand leprous and then made it better. And I promise you pour out blood, water from the Nile, it's going to turn into blood. I think I can take care of using the words that come out of your mouth to accomplish what I want it to accomplish. That's what God's saying. But he said, and here's my favorite verse in the book of Exodus almost, but he said, "Oh my Lord, please send someone else." One of the things we can see here is Moses entrenching. He's entrenching. He's digging down deeper, a hole he doesn't want to go. He's trying to keep himself right there. And God's reaction to it is anger. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. That's a fearful thing. That's a fearful thing. God being angry at me is a fearful thing. It's like hell, right? That's a scary thing. And we've talked about the psychology behind this, and the key principle being, the takeaway is, when I'm entrenching against what God wants me to do, he calls me to do something. He calls me just to be salt and light, to share the truth. If I say, no, I'm not going to do that because it's just me. Who am I? How can I speak and have anybody listen to me or believe me? I'm not making myself small. I'm making God small. I'm saying his arm is too short, that he can't get the job done, that his promises aren't true. It makes him angry. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled like fire, kindled against Moses. And don't forget, I've mentioned this before, this right here, this whole exchange that where Moses, in spite of what he's shown, think of what old God's already done to assure him. In spite of all of that, he digs in, he says, no, oh, please. He never says no, but he does say, please send someone else, okay? And don't forget this. Pharaoh's going to get crushed because of this, because God keeps telling him, the Lord God keeps telling him what to do, and he says no. He hardens his heart. We'll be talking about that. Moses was at least flirting with hardening his heart here against God and his will. But we'll talk more about the hardening of the heart and all that when we get to Pharaoh, and we'll have plenty of opportunities to consider that. But it's interesting. God is gracious to Moses because Moses is one of his kids. A good father will take a lot of crap from one of his kids because he's trying to instruct them, because he loves them, right? And that's what we see here. But it does have consequences. Mentioned before, hit it again real quick. Moses was going to be a solo actor here. No high priest. It would have just been Moses, the political ruler, the spiritual ruler, the priest. Because of this, we end up with Aaron in the picture, and then the Levitical priesthood, the descendants of Aaron, as the priests and those who served there. So it does have consequences. And he said, is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know he can speak well. Behold, he is coming to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad of heart. Again, we don't know why Aaron's coming out here. Did God prompt him? That's an assumption that we make. But Moses knows who Aaron is. That, again, is that support for the idea that he had some kind of contact with his birth family. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. Meaning, like I talk to you, you're going to talk to him. And what I say to you, you say to him. He'll say to Pharaoh, he'll say to the elders. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs. Okay. Anybody have any thoughts or comments?
Why did they just mention Aaron in 14 when wasn't he with Moses the whole time?
No, he has not yet come.
Okay. That's where I'm confused.
Yeah, he hadn't come out there yet. And Moses, we don't see anything here that Moses knew he was coming. So I think it is a logical assumption that God prompted Aaron to go out to be with Moses. And you know, maybe originally it was just the idea to have somebody else with him as support. Derek, you've been in the military. You know that it's much easier to carry out a difficult task in a pressure situation if you've got somebody with you. And it doesn't matter who. If it's a friend, if it's family, that's all the better. But there's nothing worse from what I read and hear, there's nothing worse in combat than being alone. Two guys fight 10 times more ferociously and effectively than just one is the way it works. But yeah, Aaron, and he's still on the way out. He's still on the way out. He's not there yet. So good question. Thank you. And anytime you do have a question, just pipe up, because I'll get on a track, and sometimes I just talked about two things already this morning that I hadn't thought of before that I was going to say. And I'll skip over things. I might not hit something, and I might not hit something that you just want to know about. Always, all of you, feel free to jump in and ask. And you do have to jump in, because I'll just go on and on and on like a monkey in a tree. So, and I'm going to read through this about him going back to Jethro. Just pay attention and see if there's anything that jumps off the page at you. Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." And the Lord said to Moses, and we'll stop there. Does that strike you as odd? He doesn't tell Jethro anything. He kind of misleads him. I'm going home, check on my kin, see if they're okay. Haven't seen them for a while. It's been 40 years. I thought I'd go see them. He doesn't tell Jethro. And I'm not saying that there's necessarily anything bad about that. But I think at the very least, the baseline that we have to take away from it is being at least this much is true. Moses still wasn't real excited about what he was going to do. He didn't go back to Jethro and say, "Wow, Jethro, you won't believe this. Yahweh appeared to me. He wants me to go back to Egypt and he's going to use me to free his children out of slavery." No, he says, "I'm going home to check on the family." So So he's not real fired up about it, is bare minimum that we can conclude. And Jethro says, go in peace, which is he's giving him his blessing. And there with that, understand the patriarchal system. By coming there, living there, marrying into Jethro's family, he came under the headship of Jethro. He was the leader of that clan. Okay. So that's why he goes and asks for permission. It's the way things were done. To us, that seems really odd. You know, when Jonathan decided he was moving out of the house, he didn't ask for my permission, right? We don't do that. You know, it's not the way we do things. And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, chronologically, people look at this and they get really confused because when is this? Did God appear to him again is the question. To which I say maybe, because we've seen God with Abraham appear at different times to reassure him. Because God knows we're weak. He knows we struggle, right? He knows we're but dust. He understands that. We're only alive because he breathed the breath of life into us. And so every now and then he has to breathe some strength and courage into us to inspire us to act as he would have us act. So is God appearing to him again? That's a possibility. In Hebrew, in verse 19 here, when it says, and the Lord said to Moses in Midian, that can also be translated, the Lord had said. So it would be written the same way. So this might just be a restatement of what he had said before, a summary with some details maybe we didn't have before, or he's appearing to him and giving him further assurance and encouragement. I tend toward the latter just because of everything we've just read. The Lord said to Moses in Midian, so there when he's with Jethro, getting ready, packing up the camels, checking the oil, putting air in the tires, getting ready to head out, trying to fit all the stuff in the trunk. Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead. Another reason I tend toward that second understanding is it had to occur to Moses. Man, I'm walking back into a hornet's nest. But because Pharaoh had died, the one who was seeking his life, when a new Pharaoh came in, tabula rasa, blank slate, everybody's crimes got forgiven. And Moses took his wife and his sons. Before, we'd only been told about one, Gershom, but that's because the name was important, and so they mentioned it, his sons, and had them ride on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. He had them ride on a donkey. He's hoofing it the whole way, apparently. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. And the Lord said to Moses, and this is, again, a continuation of that conversation, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power, but I will harden his heart so he will not let the people go. We're going to save the hardening of hearts for later because it's definitely an important point. It's core to what goes on in Egypt, but it's also very important that we understand it spiritually, why it happens, how it happens. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. Remember, he disinherited the 70 nations and he birthed a new one. It's his firstborn son. And firstborn is culturally all kinds of things. Very different than the way it is today. Firstborn had major status attached to it. And I say to you, let my son go that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. He's not messing around. The other thing that we should not miss here in calling Israel clearly his firstborn son, it's also talking about the level of endearment that he felt toward Israel. Okay? They're special. The nation of Israel is very, very special to him. Okay, now we get into some weird stuff, and there's no way around it. What we're going to look at next is weird, and you can read all different kinds of scholars on it. They'll talk about it. There are all kinds of rabbit trails that you can go down. But bottom line is they'll all agree it's weird. And even though most scholars won't say it, because the one thing that really is a challenge to scholars, that means guys with doctor before their name, is they don't do very well with saying, we just don't know. We just don't know. Yeah, we'll have to noodle on that some more and probably not get back to you because we're not going to come up with anything new. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah, his wife, took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood, because of the circumcision. Okay, if you want to just go through the scriptures and pick out odd sections, this is definitely, if you're going to pick 10, this is definitely in the top 5. It's really hard for us to know what was going on here. God was going to kill Moses. That means he was really upset. He didn't get this upset when Moses kept saying, oh, come on, send somebody else, Dad. I don't want to go. Come on. I don't want to cut the grass. I want to stay here and play video games. He got upset with him for that. His anger kindled. Here he's going to kill him. He's going to kill him. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him. Again, somebody was there. The Lord, incarnate, Yahweh. Notice how it's Lord. And I might just start doing that. At a lodging place on the way, Yahweh met him and sought to put him to death. All kinds of things factor in here. Circumcision, the removal of the foreskin of all men, had been the practice since Abraham. Okay? The Israelites weren't the only ones to practice circumcision, and there were different kinds of circumcision. Sometimes, like there was Egyptian circumcision, and it was, instead of removing the foreskin, they would split the foreskin. Okay? Had Moses, and I'm just throwing out the theories that scholars pose. Moses had perhaps had, because he was taken into Pharaoh's house and he wasn't going to be circumcised as a baby by his parents. Israel, Jewish circumcision, when he was going to go into Pharaoh's house, that wouldn't have gone well, right? Had he been circumcised with Egyptian circumcision and never corrected that, and so God was upset with him about that? Was God upset with him because he hadn't circumcised his son? We don't know. And it says, at a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him. Who's him? Another level of complexity, uncertainty as to who that is. Is that his son that he was going to kill? It just says him. Was that the son? And Zipporah is unhappy about the whole thing. And here feet probably does mean feet, though it was often a euphemism for genitals. So we just don't know. We just don't know. And I think it's perfectly okay. I think it's perfectly okay to come across things in the scripture. This is not core to any doctrine of salvation or anything like that. And I'm not saying it's not important, that we shouldn't try to glean from it what we can. But frankly, with that, it would be, I don't know what it would be, other than that if you're acting in a major role for God and you've disobeyed his covenant, that maybe he'll get really mad at you about that. That's maybe the one sure thing takeaway from this. But beyond that, there's just a lot of stuff here we don't know. And it's kind of, and there's nothing wrong with using this word and talking about the scriptures. It's weird. It's just weird. So I don't know. And, you know, like Forrest Gump says, that's all I have to say about that. The Lord said to Aaron, so the Lord speaks to Aaron also. The Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. We'd wondered if he'd been prompted. Yeah, the Lord told him to go. And which had to, you know, we can read this and say, oh, the Lord said to him to go. Well, that was probably kind of weird for Aaron too. He hadn't had the Lord speak to him before. That wasn't like a regular thing. So what was going through Aaron's head as he was heading out there to meet with Moses? Don't know. It had to be a good bit of anticipation. What's this about? So we went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Now we're back at the mountain of God. Did Moses stop back by there along the way? And remember, our guess is, I'm using the majestic hour. Our guess is, changing screens, so this is a visual. Yay, it's a visual. How exciting. This is Midian over here. They're heading back to Egypt. Over there. Make it bigger. So from over here, we're guessing that Mount Sinai was somewhere up around here. Somewhere up there. Definitely wasn't down there because that just doesn't work. We talked about that before. So to head back to Egypt, they're probably going to come up around here. So maybe it just, God made sure that when Aaron got down here and Moses had gone back, packed up and started heading back this way, that they met roughly there. And that's a good meeting point. And remember, it's not like you can text and say, hey, meet us at the quick trip off of exit whatever. You know, that wasn't going to work. So them meeting up at all is kind of interesting, but at the same time, people followed the same paths. They weren't roads, but there were ways that people traveled through the wilderness, and for the most part, they were going to go from oasis to oasis. So we went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him to speak and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the people of Israel. And I believe this is the first time that the elders of the people of Israel are referred to as a group. So they didn't have a king, they didn't have a ruler, they didn't have any of that, but they did know they were a people. They were a people, they were an oppressed people, but they had an elder council that would guide, direct, make sure traditions were observed, whatever else, it was going to be done through them. And notice verse 30. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses and did the signs in the sight of the people. Who did the signs? Aaron did the signs here. Just interesting. So we'll want to pay attention. And if I forget, and I will, to keep track of who's doing what, let's see if Aaron ever does the signs again or if Moses does the signs. And the people believed. What did God say the people would do? God said they'd believe. Moses doubted it. He doubted it once. He doubted it twice. He doubted it 3 times, and then he begged off. First thing it says, and don't think Moses, who's telling on himself, we forget that in writing this. This is emphatically stated. First thing it says, after all this was done, and the people believed. They believed, and they did more than believe, because belief is always followed by something else. It's always followed by something else. And the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, he's already visited them as far as they're concerned. It's talking about it in the past tense. God had come. He came to Moses, sent Moses and Aaron to them. He had visited the people of Israel and that he had seen their affliction. Don't you think they'd wondered about that for 400 years? He's forgotten us. I can go 2 days and I think God's forgotten me. I've never gone 400 years. Now, none of these people alive were that old, I know, but you know what I mean. And that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. Belief, worship. Belief and worship includes praise, right? That's what worshiping is. We're praising God. Great is the Lord. All of that. The two go together. Belief, praise, worship. Good stuff. Good stuff. Where there is one, there is going to be the other. Okay, next time we get to make bricks without straw.
That concludes our broadcast for today. We publish our videos on YouTube, BitChute, and Brighteon. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give us a like or a thumbs up. We invite you to subscribe so you can continue to receive our content. Also, please consider sharing this video with others. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment below. This is Matthias 76, and together we will continue to decode the deception.